This episode is brought to you by the continuing education courses in the Neurodiversity University. From individual study at home access to a district-wide program for all your educators, the courses from Emily Kircher-Morris can be used to fulfill CE requirements. Go to neurodiversity.university or click the link in the show notes for more information.
What I consider experiential therapy, how I practice, incorporates, based on who I'm working with, what I'm doing, incorporates work with animals, nature-based therapy, walk and talk sessions, technology.
For neurodivergent people, traditional talk-based therapy can often fall short, but experiential therapies can offer an alternative. What is experiential therapy, and in what creative and neurodiversity-affirming ways can it be used? Licensed social worker and ADHDer Chris Neely shares his insights on leveraging special interests, creative approaches in therapy, and will offer guidance for parents of neurodivergent kids. That's straight ahead on episode 225. I'm Emily Kircher-Morris, and this is the Neurodiversity Podcast.
What is neurodiversity? You see the world differently.
Autism spectrum.
Gifted.
Complexities that are inherently inside.
ADHD.
Dysgraphia.
Tourette's.
All brains are different.
You are exactly what this world needs.
This is the
Neurodiversity Podcast.
If you're an educator, I know that you are counting down the days until the school year ends and summer break begins. And if you're anything like me, while you are excited to relax, you're also looking forward to the chance to dive into all of those areas of special interest while you have a bit of free time. So, if your special interest is related to teaching neurodivergent kids, you are definitely going to want to check out the courses over at our online learning platform, Neurodiversity University. We're offering a great summer deal, 50% off any of our online courses, including strategies for supporting twice exceptional students and foundations of dyslexia for educators. Just use the code SUMMER24 when you register. You can click the link in the show notes or go to neurodiversity.university/courses to dive into all of this content and have something interesting to do this summer. All right, Chris Neely is here with me next.
Previously on the Neurodiversity Podcast.
One example that crossed my mind was from my own neurodivergent autistic daughter, who's 25. And a couple of years ago, we were talking about Christmas, and she said something about the hardest part of Christmas morning. And I said, what are you talking about? What's hard on Christmas morning? That's just fun. And she said, when you open a present and you have to remember to put a happy face on. And I said, do you mean like if you don't like the present, you don't want to hurt the person's feelings? She said, no, even if it's a great present that you love, you have to remember to put the happy face on. You know what I mean? And I said, no, I'm not autistic, by the way. No, I don't know what you mean. Like for me, my face just does what it's going to do. And in moments like that, I don't have to consciously put a happy face on.
That's episode 216. Find it wherever you get your podcasts.
Today, I am talking with Chris Neely. Chris is a licensed clinical social worker and an ADHDer. So, Chris, thank you so much for talking to me today.
Thanks for having me.
So, in the field of mental health, the common understanding about counseling or therapy is that it tends to be talk-based. Like we have this image in our minds of like the therapist sitting there like with their clipboard, taking notes while someone else talks. But for neurodivergent people, especially in your work, you have found that it's been really effective to support them using experiential therapies. So I would love for you to start off our conversation just by explaining a little bit more about what experiential therapy is.
Yeah, so experiential therapy, it's therapy that's doing something typically active or engaging some sense other than talking. That being said, the majority of my work currently is via telehealth, and so there's a lot of talk therapy involved in that. I'm not dismissing talk therapy. It's simply that folks with ADHD and other neurodiversities that I work with, sitting and talking, that's part of the reason why a lot of folks are coming into therapy, like sitting and talking a difficult piece. And so embracing the therapeutic concept of meeting the client where they are, I have found that I myself who have ADHD, I've got like a basket of fidgets and a sketchbook and all kinds of things around me. Not because I'm bored by clients, but because I can forget that somebody's talking to me. Like it's just part of the neurology of all of it. And so with experiential therapy, it's a way of tapping in something ideally that's interesting to the client and that allows more than speaking with them.
Just kind of doing something, being more active with something. So what are some of the types of experiential therapy? Like, I guess maybe one that comes to mind for me is like play therapy, but I'm sure there are some others. So what are some other types of experiential therapy and how can they be used?
I've been doing equine facilitated psychotherapy, or EFP, which is working with horses, since about 2011. There's still not a ton of research on it. There's a lot more now and a lot more interest and a lot more understanding of it than there was, 12, 13 years ago. But in that type of work, it's working with horses. Now, when we do it, it really becomes nature-based and animal-based. So we have working with horses, we've got goats, we have dogs, we have a wide range of animal partners that we'll collaborate with. But for instance, for parenting sessions, for example, the traditional type of therapy, if you've got a couple coming in and they're working on their issue, or parents coming in and working on their issue, as a person with ADHD, I can get stuck in the details or miss the details. And so one strategy I found working with horses is we don't really even have to get into it. Instead of getting stuck in the spiral or the cycle and worrying about triangulation and like, well, last night he didn't do the dishes and this morning I had to clean up. Cool. Let's go out. Today we're going to do a fun activity. Therapy should be challenging. It can also be fun. And so let's go out and you two have a challenge today. You're working with this horse you've met and there's an obstacle course. Work together to solve the puzzle. And the idea behind it being, we'll see the patterns of how you interact together. As you might imagine, it's kind of like, as soon as you go in to do an in-class observation of a student, or you try to tell somebody, hey, look at this really cool thing, and it stops happening, that's totally fine. Sometimes it'll happen and they're like, well, that's not how he usually does it. Like, and it's like, yep, do you agree that you accomplished this task? Well, yeah, but that's not how it happens. Got it. So what this tells us is you can do it. So what do you like about how he did it this time? Got it. So can you replicate that tonight with the kids? And so we were able to bridge those pieces there. And then as far as what I consider experiential therapy, how I practice, it incorporates, based on who I'm working with, what I'm doing, incorporates work with animals, nature-based therapy, walk and talk sessions, technology. So video gaming or different online gaming, PC games or PlayStation or Nintendo Switch. I found a good reason to have a lot of game systems as an adult gamer because I can say it's all for work.
It's a business expense.
It's a business expense. I mean, it really is. I didn't know that at first. And then people were like, hey, how many sessions a week are you playing Fortnite? And I'm like, about like 3 or 4 hours a week with clients. They're like,
yeah, well,
if you need a new remote, like that's a business expense. I was like, oh, that's awesome. I didn't think about it. Even that has been a challenge, or it used to be more of a challenge to get parents to understand it when working with their kids or their teens of like, well, he said you guys have been playing Madden. And it's like, yeah, I can explain to you what we're doing. And so for Madden, for example, I had a kid who really liked playing Madden and like the football game. And so we would spend to get him, he did not want to be in therapy. He was like 12 years old. And to get his engagement in it, I was like, cool, we can play Madden. And so we started by just playing Madden in sessions. And then it evolved into, I was like, cool, before we start Madden next week, you're going to design a character. So in the game, you're going to build a character. The first character, we should through like some basic emotions. Your first character is anger. So he named it, which one's anger. I think for this kid, it was the quarterback. The way the game works, you have these stat points and you design your character, your player. And so anger was the quarterback and like just like 7'8" or something, just this massive guy. And then we got to talk through it in a joking way. Like, why is anger so big? And he's like, because anger's the biggest one. And I was like, okay, why is anger the quarterback? So anger's calling the plays. Like, and so sadness was the kicker and it was like super tiny. He's like, which is such a strike against kickers in football. But just finding fun ways like that are experiential. They're tapping into what the kid likes. And maybe it's just my ADHD talking. I do think it's important that as a therapist, you're tapping into experiences that you also enjoy. Because just to be frank, as a person with ADHD, I'm not a good therapist for 99.9% of people. If you aren't neurodivergent, I'm going to drive you crazy. I'm going to get on tangents. I'm going to rapidly speak. I'm going to get excited about something you say. And those aren't really my people. And so, a therapist who isn't a gamer trying to incorporate this, I've seen it fail too many times. It's kind of like these companies and these groups that will put out a therapeutic video game or a therapeutic board game. And as a gamer, no one is playing those because they're not fun. Mm-hmm. And so finding someone who is making a game, first and foremost, it's Fortnite or Call of Duty or Madden or Mario Kart or whatever. It's a game. And having a therapist gamer that can be like, oh, here's how we can tie in the social skill here. Here's how we can tie in team building in this game. Here's how you can coordinate in this. I think one of my most fun video game examples, I had a kid who didn't want to be in therapy. It's the only reason I ever started playing Fortnite. As a purist gamer years ago, I was very anti-Fortnite. Got into it because this kid was just like, that's the only way he'll try therapy. And it was online, which video games also made the jump to telehealth during COVID seamless. We're already seeing in my office playing these games. Now we're just playing them online.
Sure.
But this kid, for people who are listening who know what Fortnite is, you'll get it, I guess. But there's a mode called Duos. And it's basically you're on a 2-person team against like 50 other teams of 2 people. And we had this rule that was, we're talking about responsiveness, because he would get so hyper-focused in the game that he would not listen to me at all. And so it was like, cool, I'll offer a social press. And that could be, let's go south, or there's a target to the south. Or it could be, how was your school day today? And you have 10 seconds. And if you don't respond within 10 seconds, I give away your position, because I just pull out whatever the biggest weapon is and fire into the sky. The other players in the game can hear where we're at. And that became a fun way. Oh, it was fun for me. He got very ragey about it at first. But it became a funny way of like, that was the call back to him. That's what mattered.
Right.
Oh, somebody's talking to me. What matters is you're giving away my position in this game. And so just finding fun ways like that to bridge it is really what I consider to be experiential therapy at this stage.
Yeah. I really like that, because what you're talking about is taking a neurodivergent person's special interest and your own interest as far as being authentic and really showing up for your clients and helping to build that rapport and that trust in order to then work on whatever goals they might really have. We talk so much in the mental health field about quote unquote social skills or whatever. And what I believe, though, is that so many neurodivergent people know the answer. They know what to do, but it's not real. They're not really practicing that skill until they're actually practicing it. And so what I hear you talking about, though, is that you're putting them in some much more authentic, lifelike situations where they're actually having to reflect on and practice some of these things in real time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with the applied theater approach, that was one of my biggest pieces of it. I worked with 2 folks early on. I was very fortunate. These people who were like published and already known in the world reached out to me. I was able to go and work with them. I might have been a grad student still, but incorporating the theater piece of it was really moving in that, because I'd worked with enough folks on the spectrum at that point. I'd been working with that population off and on since I was like 18 years old, who I've got the shelves of the workbooks and things, and I still use them. But the folks who, circle the face that matches this scenario and fill in the blank of what you'd say here, got it. And then you go to the job interview and do none of those skills. And so we talk about then the generalization of skill sets, right? So with folks with autism, I think it's most people, but especially folks with neurodiverse brains like ours, just because I can do a skill here does not mean I can do it over here.
Mm-hmm.
And so theater allows this way of actually full body experiencing it and practicing it. Wear your suit. We're going to play these roles. It also gives you a way of practicing the bad way. I did stand-up comedy for a while, and I realized like that's why I also really enjoy working with certain folks, is because when I would work with people and we do some theater type things, I'm really big on, let's imagine the worst case scenario. What's the worst case scenario that is unlikely to happen? Like a meteor hit and kills everybody. Got it. So anything better than that. So, all right, let's have fun with it. And so what's your biggest fear of going into this job interview? I don't get the job. All right. That's not that big of a deal. And be in a jovial way, not a dismissive way, of like, what's really a bigger embarrassment?
Right.
What if you go in, the interviewer reaches their hand out and you vomit on them? Cool. Let's play through that. And so being able to, let's do it and see what that looks like. Now you've experienced the feeling of this, what it feels like if you were to throw up on this person. That's really unlikely to happen.
Using humor, but then also kind of building that resilience. Like if you can get through this, I've often heard about using like improv as a clinical skill. Kind of the same thing where I think a lot of neurodivergent people, for various reasons, maybe they just don't have a lot of confidence in themselves, or it's harder for them to kind of think on their feet in some of those social situations. But having that opportunity to relatively quickly, or at least in real time, perhaps, try to come up with something can be really helpful to help them figure out, like, if this thing happens, then at least I know I can get through it, as opposed to being really fearful of that.
Hey there, if you're an educator looking to create a more inclusive classroom, You should check out the courses at Neurodiversity University. The courses are all led by Emily Kircher-Morris, and they're packed with videos, handouts, and quizzes to help you better educate neurodivergent students, and students of all neurotypes, really. You can choose from a number of modules dealing with topics like learning how to support dyslexic students, nurturing gifted or twice exceptional kids, or helping autistic and ADHD learners thrive. There's even a course on using AI and fan communities to build coping strategies. These courses are great for professional development or to fulfill your continuing ed requirements. And parents, you can use them to better understand how teachers are accommodating your kids' needs and get some ideas to advocate from a stronger position. The university is part of the Neurodiversity Alliance, just like our podcast. So now you know, all that's left to do is head to the link in the description and check it all out. Remember, get 50% off for a limited time using the promo code SUMMER24.
What I want to talk about a little bit now is about parenting neurodivergent children. That can be really difficult for a lot of reasons. I think, first of all, a lot of us parent the way that we were parented because we don't know what other options there are. Just in the world, there's this misunderstanding of what neurodivergent kids need. And so therefore, there's then a lack of support for it. And I think there's this other piece of it, too, that the neurodivergent apple not falling far from the neurodivergent tree. So what are some factors that you consider when you are really working with parents of neurodivergent young people?
On the front end, if I'm working with a kid, period, and not with the parents, I would ask to meet with the parents at some point or get some feedback from them. I haven't had it happen as much lately, but early on, there's those pieces of like, he's angry all the time. We need him to stop being angry. And so what's he angry about? Nothing. He's just always angry. This sounds like a parenting concern because it sounds like your kid is upset about something and you don't know what it is. That might be where we need to start, is figuring out, like, instead of saying he's upset about nothing and needs to stop being so angry, is he actually angry? Is he feeling something else? Something is dysregulated, but it can't be nothing. And so first and foremost, it's trying to get parents to broaden their mind a little bit about their kid and their own assumptions. One of my first notes I'd written down about this topic was their own neurodiversities. And so it's sensitive. I'm still surprised by the fact I'll have parents who are so willingly and openly like, I think I also am on the spectrum, or I think I also have ADHD. And I still have the same number of parents who I'm hesitant to even try to figure out how to draft an email to send it to the parent because I know how they're going to respond because I've worked with their kid, and I'll send it and the parent's like, well, no, it's not about me. Like, so part of it is their own neurodiversities for the parents that are willing to hear that or able to hear it. And then the psychoeducation about their kids and that piece of having a better understanding and a better awareness of what ADHD is to help influence or inform your parenting is vital. I'm just going to be stereotypical here because what I see, it is mostly dads are not the ones I'm hearing from as a therapist. They're not often the ones, not saying always, I go to my kids' appointments, but they're not often the ones who go to their kids' appointments. They don't often understand the medications. And so there's oftentimes a gap there where you'll have parent A who gets it for their kid, but really struggles because the disciplinary standards or the parenting strategies are so disconnected. And so then if you're trying to work with this kid who's 12, I don't know how to do that without somehow also incorporating the parents, because everything this kid does, if it's misaligned or the parents have misaligned parenting expectations, there's no amount of therapy in the world that's going to make this 12-year-old make the right decision at home. And so that's a big piece of it, is having parents embrace the psychoeducation of it. You also have the extreme side. You'll have the folks who like maybe just got a diagnosis or their kid just recently got a diagnosis and they are in that kind of tornado of trying to gobble up all the information they can about ADHD or autism. And I'm very quick with parents on that of like, listen, you've known this kid for X number of years. The diagnosis you got yesterday at this clinic doesn't take away what you know about your kid.
Right.
Let's practice some visual structure here and some time management. Same thing's going to help your kid if you're going to be doing research and reading about autism or ADHD because your kid has a diagnosis. Then what I'm going to encourage you to do is set aside blocks of time on your Google Cal or your wall calendar or whatever, and that's restrict yourself. That's the time I'm going to do it. I give it 2 hours on Tuesdays and Thursdays, or I give it 30 minutes Monday through Friday or something, because you will never get to the end of it. There are 100,000 pages of text online for you to read about this. You're going to eventually get to a place where it's repetitive, or you get to a place where it's contradictory. And what you don't need to not lose sight of is the kid that's down the hall. That's still your kid. And so I do try to offer, I don't even have a select few books of this is the one, but I do try to offer like, here's a place to start, or here's a website to start at. Chad, for example, is I think it's a great website to just be able to get that weekly news feed for parents of like, here, limit yourself to reading the articles that they send out in this newsfeed. Don't try to read everything on the internet, and don't click every hyperlink at the bottom. The other big piece with parents too is like, discussing discipline, which I think as a social worker in my field, it's a little bit complicated. And when I talk about discipline, I'm not talking about like spanking or punishment. What I mean by discipline, there's a documentary called Buck Brenneman, who's a horseman, Sundance Festival winner. It's a great film. I do recommend that to parents, whether we're working with horses or not. But like Buck's whole background is he grew up in an abusive household. And when you see him from the outside, and I've had the fortunate opportunity to meet him once, he seems very like Clint Eastwood cowboy, like very like rough edge. But he kind of is this forefather of this natural horsemanship idea, or this way of like communicating with horses the way horses communicate with each other. And so he talks about working with horses and developing an empathetic approach to horses. And that's how you teach discipline. I've heard him talk before about like, think about a horse that you're walking in on and you're saying this horse doesn't trust anybody. And we're trying to put a saddle on this horse so we can learn how to ride it. And he described it beautifully. And he said, this horse has a primal brain and you're walking in as a predator. And you're saying, hey, horse, I'm a predator. Just trust I'm not going to eat you. And before I get on your back, I'm going to throw this other dead animal, like the leather of a saddle, across your shoulders. And then I'm going to grab around your neck. And then I get really mad at you when you kick me off or bite me. And he just introduces this empathetic perspective of like, consider the horse. This horse has no reason to trust you doing this. It's against every instinct. And so then you apply that to your kids. Mm-hmm. If your kid is taught through the school system or through you as a parent that a bad grade means I'm in trouble or I am bad, then yeah, your kid's going to hide the report card from you. And then if you punish them for hiding your report card, don't do it next time, you've now hurt them for hiding something from you because they were afraid of getting hurt.
Right.
And so all of that, working with parents on understanding like what motivates your kid and how do you inform discipline, comes back to video games. So many of the kids and young adults I work with play video games. Helping parents even understand the nuance of like, do you ever play the games your kid plays? No. Okay, there's going to be a disconnect there. And I don't even mean the grading system. I don't mean a 10-year-old playing Call of Duty. Should they? No, I don't think so. But if they are, as a parent, you should probably be playing it with them. But I just mean the nuance of understanding how the game works. If your kid is into playing a basketball game, NBA 2K24 or whatever, and every day after school, your kid gets 30 minutes of game time. And what you don't realize is they're trying to get online and play an online tournament or get online and play somebody online. Well, it takes 12 minutes of their game time just getting online and finding and going through the matchmaking piece. And so every day, their 30-minute timer goes off. We're all big on timers. I am too, big on timers and things with neurodiverse kids. But the timer goes off and now we don't understand why they're so frustrated about it. You just had 30 minutes to play your game. Now you're still arguing. We got to readjust it. If the game your kid plays is a game like a sports game like that and they're playing online, 30 minutes doesn't make sense. It's like telling you, well, listen, Emily, I know you like coffee. And so your reward is you get to have coffee at the end of the week. And the thing you like about coffee is the caffeine from it. And then every week you like earn your pot of coffee and it's cold because it was heated yesterday and it's decaf. And it's like, well, I don't understand why you're upset. You're like, I'm giving you your coffee. And so to me, it's that piece of what's the motivation for your kid? That's how you're going to build discipline. And discipline is, and again, I'm also taking this from Buck. It's not forcing your kid to do the right thing. It's helping your kid learn to make the right decision when the wrong decision is an option. What I mean by that is letting your kid fail. And I think failure is probably going to be my biggest push on this podcast is let your kid fail. We have an entire, more than one generation, I think. I mean, I'm 40. I think it came up with my generation too, of like being terrified of failure. I'm big with parents too. If they like, we have, talk about their kid. Well, we have exams coming up. No, we don't. Like Johnny is in 6th grade. I am not, and you are not. Like Johnny has exams coming up. Well, that's what I mean. But we have so much studying. No, we don't. Johnny needs accountability for it. Well, he can't study by himself. Okay, we should work on that. But an option here is not that he brings home his test and his homework and you fill it all out and send it back to school. That's not helping anybody in this situation. And so, well, he'll fail this class. Okay. Totally fine. Kids are supposed to fail. That's okay. And so allowing your kid to fail, I think, is major, and letting your kid fail without punitive consequences. I also like being vulnerable in things. I am really good working with kids. I have much more patience with other people's kids than my own. I live with her. That's part of it. Like that's, my own kids are a little more stressful. Like I see your kid for 50 minutes once a week.
Right. It's a lot easier to externalize that. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm really big on that. Like, so when I'm talking to parents, I'm like, listen, I have a mom who's upset. She's like, I yelled at my kid this morning. And I was like, I yelled at my kid this morning too. Like, got it. Now what do we do about it? I also apologize to my kid. She didn't accept it. So this afternoon, I'll again offer like, listen, you don't have to forgive me. I am sorry for yelling at this morning. I need to do better with that. So owning up and modeling for our kids. But again, letting kids fail. And my kid has had to do it. If she has ADHD, we have accommodations in place for at home and scheduling and stuff. But I'm a big believer that having awareness of our diagnosis can help inform our decisions and help us not hate ourselves. If I fail this thing, I have ADD. That's why I was late for this thing. And I'm accountable for it.
Mm-hmm.
I missed this job opportunity because I missed the interview. Cool. I'm not going to beat myself up over it. I have ADHD, but I am accountable for it. So I need to figure out what I'm going to do different. And so, I am one of these people. If my kid comes home today from school at 5:30 and says, I have a science project due tomorrow and I need to go to the store and buy these projects and build a volcano, I guess you're getting an F on the project. I'm not going to the store tonight. No, that's not. When did you get the assignment issued? If you have a bad teacher who issued the assignment today, that's different.
Right.
But if you're just like, well, we were given this assignment 4 weeks ago, I guess you got a 0 then. I draw a volcano and turn it in. I'm really big on the natural consequences of I understand you have ADHD and I understand that failed. I'm not going to make fun of you. I'm not going to punish you. It's not like, well, you better get it. Listen, what's the takeaway from this? Next time you get an assignment, you need to let somebody know the day you get it. Mm-hmm. Where are you writing this down? What can we do? And so everything's a learning moment. It doesn't have to be punishment to develop discipline. And in fact, if you rely just on punishment, you're just building fear.
Right.
I'll bring one more of these back to a horse world real quick. The concept of, even if you don't work with horses, I'm sure most people have heard the phrase breaking a horse in, like breaking a horse. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize that was I didn't realize that what it really meant until I started working with horses, and I've seen it happen. It's so gross to me. I've seen it happen in real life. But it's the concept of you take a horse who's not trained, quote unquote, and back in the day, you might tie them to a post, or you're using physical punishment to dominate this animal. You're hitting them with a rope with knots on it. You're hitting them with a stick. Mm-hmm. You're making them stop trying to get away from you. And what you're doing is breaking the horse. Mm-hmm. What we mean by that is you're breaking this animal's consciousness. You're breaking their spirit. You're breaking their mood. So they just give up and check out. What works great for that is if you're trying to turn a profit. I get this horse in, I can break this horse, use this method, and in 6 weeks, I have a horse I can sell. Mm-hmm. And you can ride them. The other side of this, like buck style or natural horsemanship, or the way we work with horses, is build a relationship. Now, it might take a year with a horse to get this horse comfortable with somebody riding this horse. But what you now have is a horse that's not terrified every time they see a person. Mm-hmm. And so the beautiful story of this is, if I rush and break a horse and make this horse scared of me, and I've got spurs on my feet, and we're riding down a trail, and I tug a little to the right or use my spurs on his hip to tell him to turn, is he turning because he respects me and he's saying, I respect what you want and I'm going to do it? Or is he doing it because he's afraid of the consequences of not doing what I want? And it's that. If you break your horse, then he's turning because he doesn't want to get hit for not doing what I tell him. Mm-hmm. That might work great for you, and you think that's a solid relationship, until the day you come across a hill and you run to a pack of wolves. And now your horse is faced with this dire situation of like, okay, if I keep going straight, you won't hit me, but I think I'm going to get eaten. And your horse in that situation is right for doing it, may make the decision to throw you off and just run back to the barn. Mm-hmm. And basically the horse is like, I will take you beat my ass when we get back, mm-hmm. before I'm going to go walk through a pack of wolves. And so you build a relationship piece, and we have a horse named Moose at our farm. My partner, Morgan, she's really the one who's taught me so much about horses over the last 14 years or so. She's phenomenal with horses. I've seen her with wild horses out in California. She's a phenomenal horse person. And Moose is a mini horse. He's a small horse, but he ranks very high in our herd. And years ago, she had worked with Moose to pull a small wagon, basically. So she like Western style. Like she'd sit on this little wagon and then Moose would pull her along. Adorable look. And they got asked to be in a local town's parade. Sweet. Nothing wrong with that. Lack of consideration by the planners. She gets there, and what they have in front of her, they start unraveling the stuff out of a trailer in the truck. There's a hot air balloon festival that happens also near Charlotte each year. And so it was a hot air balloon basket. And so what they would do during the parade was just pull the handle and shoot the fire out of the top of this thing. And there had been no preparation with Moose about like,
what do you do?
Yeah. So many people, if you have broken this horse and just disciplined this horse through punishment and fear, this fire-breathing dragon is way scarier to me than you, and you're going to have chaos.
Right.
Moose's response, I think, I was not there, my understanding from the reporting, was a shiver and kind of a check back to her with his ear of like, what in the hell is going on? And she basically was like, didn't overreact. And she was like, we're good. And he was like, all right, I am scared, but I trust you in this. And then they finished the parade. And that's what we want to get with our kids, is that piece of like, sometimes things pop up that we aren't prepared for. I want my kid to trust me to check in with me.
Mm-hmm.
If my kid thinks that they turn back at me and say, hey, what do I do? And I say, oh my God, you don't know what to do, and throw my hands up, I'm teaching you, don't ask me for help.
Right.
And then I'm confused when you're 16, 17, 18, 20, 21. And I get a message and I'm like, what do you mean your lights are turned out? You taught your kid not to ask you for help all along.
Right.
And in the guise of, I'm teaching you independence. And that's a whole other piece of independence to me, is knowing what you can do for yourself and then knowing who to ask for help if it happens. I have no idea about plumbing. If my toilet starts firing water up right now, it is not independent for me to say, let me go handle it. It's ignorant. I don't know what I'm doing. The most independent thing for me to do is to call the plumber and say, can you come fix this?
Mm-hmm.
But we teach our kids independence is doing it yourself. And you stack that on top of, we taught kids don't fail.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have this person who's just running around, doesn't know what they're doing, but can't ask for help, and then has to lie about it when they mess it up. And then we sit back and we're like, what's wrong with this generation of kids that don't understand? Well, we've taught them this. We taught them to be like these little like egotistical, can't fail people. And then we're like, why aren't you ever asking people for help?
Mm-hmm.
Because you were told a B is bad in 5th grade.
Yeah.
Like we're like, what? No.
Or
like,
when you asked for help, you got in trouble for it, or you
ridiculed.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's an amazing example. I really like that, to help exemplify really what that relationship between a parent and child can be, and really trying to move away from that place where you don't want it based on fear. You don't want a relationship based on anxiety and stress of disappointing someone or getting in trouble or whatever that might be.
Yeah. I'm from like the Southeast North Carolina area. My grandfathers, I think, were that way with my parents, and my dad was like that when I was a kid, which was like, you don't have to like me, but you want to respect me.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, I was probably 20 years old, 22 years old still, and was thinking through the concept of like a healthy dose of fear by a parent makes sense.
Mm.
And not until I like started getting into therapy, and I was like, oh, that's not okay at all. Like I shouldn't be afraid of my caregiver.
Right.
But respect and fear look really, really similar.
Yeah.
If I come over and ask you to move, lunch money story is my favorite. Emily, if you and I are in school together in 6th grade, and on the first day you come over and like pinch my shoulder really hard, and you say, what do you have for me for lunch? And I say, I didn't bring you lunch. And you hit me one time in the face and say, what's in your bag? And you open it and you say, I like Cheetos. And you pick it up and you go, can I have these? And I go, I was going to eat them. And you hit me again, have these? And I was like, yes. And you go, thanks, man. And you ruffle my hair and walk away. Tomorrow when you walk back up and say, hey, Chris, how's it going? And you pat me on the shoulder and say, did you bring me anything for lunch today? And I say, yeah. And I got you these Fritos and ham to you. And you say, thanks, man. See you later. 6 months later, when that behavior is still happening, people watch that and they're like, oh, they're friends. He respects him. Mm-hmm. He respects what his friend wants, these Fritos, and they respect it. And you realize, no. I'm giving this to him because I'm terrified of the consequences of saying no.
Right.
And if our kids are scared to say no to us, or it happens, or we are scared to say no to our kids, we got some stuff to work on there.
Yeah. Chris, this has been a really good conversation. I know we could keep talking all day, but just as we wrap up, it brings me to our closing question for today. So if you were talking to a parent of a neurodivergent child who's trying to wrap their head around what they need to do to best support their child, what is it that you would want them to hear? Like, what's the one thing that you feel like would be the takeaway that they could really put into action right away?
Model what you want.
Mm.
If you find you're getting caught in a cycle of like escalated and yelling because your kid is escalated and yelling, who do you expect to model what's supposed to happen? And we do it. I mean, good parents do it.
Mm.
It happens sometimes where it's like just overwhelmed, especially if you're a neurodiverse parent. Remembering, like, I can't have more expectation out of my kid than I do for myself. If she is yelling at me and I'm yelling at her, doesn't matter the cause or who started it. We got to regulate the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a book I typically recommend to folks. I don't know if there's language barriers on here, but the book is called How to Stop Losing Your Shit with Your Kids. It's by Carl Nomberg. It's a really fun take on it, and I think what I like about it is it just like opens up the gate for parents to accept, like, oh, I'm not the only one who like loses my shit on my kids, and it's in an approachable manner. And the other part is like recognizing, like, if something's not working, don't keep doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Recognizing what are your kids' interests. If you're upset because your kid never wants to be around you, and every time he comes home he just spends all his time in his room playing video games, cool, then join him. Well, I want him to go outside and do something else. That's totally fine. Model for him how to join someone. And so if you have not once ever gone and played a video game with your 14-year-old who plays video games every day after school, like you say, What lesson has he learned about wanting to go ride a bike with you on Saturday? Nobody's taught him that. And so joining with your kid and then embracing the piece again of like discipline is not about over control. Discipline means your kid's at a party. Somebody says, do you want to take these pills? Discipline is your kid saying no. Or discipline is your kid taking it and realizing, oh my God, I'm freaking out. I'm going to call mom or I'm going to call dad to come pick me up. That's what we want out of our kids. Like discipline to make healthy decisions and then the trust in the relationship with your parent to reach out to you. If you just have them terrified of you, it doesn't typically work out well.
Chris Neely, thank you so much for your time today.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
The best way to learn is through doing. Rather than talking through social situations in a structured group, participating in a group that's relevant to my interests and builds on my strengths is going to help me have lived experience that is so much more meaningful and long-lasting. Whether it's through play or creating sand tray scenes or working with horses or building with Lego or playing a video game, the list goes on with ways to tie the skills that we're helping people build that makes them relevant to their lives. And that means there's a much better chance for a long-lasting impact. I'm Emily Kircher-Morris. I'll see you next time on the Neurodiversity Podcast.
Thanks to Chris Neely. If you want info about his work, we have a link to his website in the show notes. By the way, lots of questions being answered and problems being solved, or at least things getting discussed, in our Facebook group. We'll put a link to it in the show notes. We would love for you to join us. Our host is Emily Kircher-Morris. Our office manager and social media director is Krista Brown. I'm the executive producer, Dave Morris. For all of us, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time. This is a service of the Neurodiversity Alliance.